I read only 5 books in March. And there's one book in particular that I blame for this, but we'll get to that in a second. But before I start talking about the books, a couple of disclaimers. The first is that I'm not here to shit on writers personally. I know that sometimes people want to get really crazy and start talking about how much people suck. I don't like to do that. I feel like, as an author myself, it would really feel shitty to find out that someone was on a video talking about how untalented or sucky I am. As it is, there's going to be a book here that I'm going to be talking about how bad the book is. I don't want to attack this person personally as well, so I'm not going to be doing that. The second thing that I'm going to say is that you have every right to love the books I don't like. You have every right to hate the books that I love. What you don't have a right to do is be an asshole. If you're going to be in my comments being rude to people, being rude to me, that comment won't stay. I am not afraid to block people and delete comments. Just because you feel like being a jerk does not mean that you have the right to an audience, least of all mine. But for the rest of you, I love hearing stuff, so don't be afraid to talk. I love talking about books, and you people are my people. Now, let's go ahead and get into the books that I read in March. It was a rough start to my month, and I know that for some people, rough would mean that I was reading a bunch of 1 and 2 star books. I was not. I only really had one book that dropped below 2 stars, but it was still not a ton of fun at first. The first book that I read in March was Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna van Veen. This had been suggested to me by Goodreads, actually, around October, because I had been looking for spooky books for Halloween. But in case you're just coming here and you don't know how this works with me, to keep things interesting, I actually don't choose what comes up next on my TBR. I have a generator, a randomizer, and I put my choices in there and it chooses for me. So this didn't come up until now. Also, I forgot to mention, I try to stay away from spoilers in these videos, so I will let you know if anything comes up, but this is just me kind of telling you what the book is about without giving away any spoilers. Blood on Her Tongue is very well written. It is very atmospheric. It's a perfect book, I think, for people who want to feel as if they are really getting into that rainy, cold, fall Halloween feel. It was a perfect book for that. In March, it was kind of weird to feel, but I'm kind of a spooky girl all year round, so it was cool for me. So Blood on Her Tongue is a gothic horror novel set in, I believe, the 1800s, and it concerns Lucy and Sarah, twins who are very close, but also have had their issues in the past. And basically, what happens is Sarah falls ill and sends a letter to Lucy that is concerning, which makes Lucy rush to her side as she is ill. And things just continue to look worse and worse as she's there. Sarah begins to crave blood. She bites people. And as per usual with most horror novels, you kind of have to suspend some disbelief that nobody knows what a vampire is. I always think it's very interesting when you read a horror novel and it's like, in that universe, you have to assume that the thing that is the main monster doesn't exist. Like, you find that a lot in zombie fiction. A lot of the time, people will be like, oh no, this guy got up from being dead, and how do I kill him? And it's like, do zombies just not exist in your world? Like, you don't have movies telling you to shoot them in the head, or that, you know, if someone's bit, that's how they change. Like, it's kind of the same concept. Like, she's biting people and craving blood, and nobody's like, vampire, which is very odd to me. But like I said, the atmosphere is top notch. Johanna van Veen has an awesome understanding of atmosphere and gloom and darkness. She really takes you to where the story is set. There is a really cool undercurrent talking about how women were treated back during the Victorian era. And without giving anything away, I think it actually has a pretty interesting take on what vampires are. It's not the usual just a person is bitten and they turn into a vampire type lore, which I thought was also pretty creative. I'm not entirely certain what this book was missing for me, but there was something that was missing in it that stopped it from being a hard 4-star book for me. Even when I finished it and I tried to think really hard about what it was, I could not put my finger on it. I'm not sure if it was just a personal thing or if there was truly something about the writing that just wasn't grabbing me, but I could not get into it hard enough to say, man, I want a physical copy of this. I don't just want to read this on a Kindle. The ending was satisfying. It was the right amount of creepy, the right amount of kind of fucked up. It was a good read. It was a fun read. There was just something about it that kept me from being really pulled in by it. When I finished it, I remember saying, okay, that was a fun read. And it was a quick read, but it was just not grabbing me the way that I had hoped that it would. So I wound up giving Blood on Her Tongue 3.75 stars. Just, if anybody wants to kind of comment if they have the same problem and tell me what it could have been that was missing, that would be great. So then after that, you guys, if anybody's been watching these book wrap-ups, you probably know that I have really been enjoying the Dungeon Crawler Carl series by Matt Dinniman. Every book has hit pretty hard. Nothing has been below 3 stars. That being said, the book that I read this month is the last one that is out right now. As of May 12th, book 8 will be out. So this was book 7. It's called This Inevitable Ruin. And it was, in my opinion, the weakest book of the series. The thing that I think that's really propelled Dinniman's work and that's made it enjoyable to read and made it interesting and made it kind of one of a kind has been his humor and his ability to tell a story that is full of poignancy and honesty and also still just be very silly and not take itself too seriously. And This Inevitable Ruin felt like a lot of that humor was lost. It was, at this point, it's exploring the fact that Carl and the gang are now in what's called faction wars, where a lot of the higher ups, the upper crust that also helps to pay for this dungeon show, they are all interested in coming onto this TV show and fighting and killing off crawlers and trying to take some of this area for themselves. And Carl is kind of slowly losing it because he's having to lose a lot of his friends. He's having to do things that he's not proud of to try to essentially fight against these corporations to get a leg up. And it's a cool concept. The whole thing is a cool concept. And unless he completely shits the bed, I 100% plan on owning the Dungeon Crawler Carl series when all 10 books are out. But it just felt like a lot of Dinniman's ability to be cheerful at the same time that he is railing against capitalism was lost. It just felt like a very angry, kind of straightforward book, and there were a lot of descriptions of war strategies and battle, and none of that was really what I was reading Dungeon Crawler Carl for. So it didn't really hit the same for me. That being said, I'm very excited for book 8, but this one just, I was listening to it as an audiobook. I highly recommend that that's how you start with this series. If you are going to start the series, I 100% suggest that you listen to it as an audiobook because it is so well done. Jeff Hayes and Sound Booth Theaters just blow it out of the water. It is so much fun. It's hilarious. But even with them doing it, I was just kind of not really looking forward to listening to it because it was just kind of listening to a book. It wasn't listening to anything that was exciting or interesting for me. So I would say that really This Inevitable Ruin gets probably one of the lowest ratings of any of the books to me, which is a 3-star, which for a lot of people I know is not terrible, but for me, for Dungeon Carl, that's pretty low. So hopefully book 8 will be even better. But hey, I still loved it. Still love the series, so it's fine. Okay, I'm gonna sit so that I'm more comfortable because I'm about to bitch so hard about this next one. I can't sit in this chair, guys. Do you see how far back this is putting me? I can't sit in that chair like that, which is terrible because I'm old and my back hurts, but that's all right. Before I get into complaining about this book, before I get into really railing against the time suck that was this book, I just want to point out that a high number of you are not following me on YouTube. If you're watching this video, chances are you're not following. Please follow me. I am an independent author. Every follow, every like, every comment actually helps to boost my signal, helps others to find me, to possibly find my work. And I love finding my people, and I want more help finding my people, and you are my people. So follow me, please. Like and subscribe. It means so much. And comment. I love hearing from you guys. Okay, so moving on. What's the book I'm talking about? A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. What was that? What are we doing? Guys, this book, okay. I was excited about this book when I first saw it in the stores. I saw the cover, the title, and I was like, this sounds like my kind of thing. I literally judged a book by its cover, and this is what I get for it. I think when I posted about it in my Instagram stories, I described it as a literary root canal, and that's what this was for me. There's your TLDR. So if you don't want to know why, you can go ahead and move on to the next book. But if you want to know why, let's get into it. A Discovery of Witches, for those of you who do not know, is a book about, I don't even remember what the main character's name is, and I'm not going to look it up. It doesn't matter to me because I'm never reading this book again. It's about a woman who is a scholar at Oxford, and it just so happens that she is also a witch. But she has a lot of personal issues in her past that have made it so that she's actually not really interested in understanding her magic at all. So, she really just kind of works her magic by being a very studied scholar, specifically in alchemy and old-time science. And while she is in Oxford, she winds up meeting a man whose name I also don't remember. He's a sexy vampire because, of course, they are. And it turns out that in this world, vampires, witches, and these creatures called demons all exist in this alongside humans. And humans don't really know about that, but they all know about each other, and they all kind of have like this tenuous understanding of one another. And the whole thing kicks off when our main heroine accidentally calls up a very important document, a manuscript that is very old, that supposedly talks about the history of all three creatures and talks about the mystery behind the powers that all these creatures have. And once she calls it up, this manuscript that's supposed to not be able to be called up by anyone, she becomes a source, she becomes like a target for a lot of very strong and powerful people. And the only one who seems to be interested in protecting her and doing the best for her is her vampire pal. And on paper, this didn't sound so bad. It sounded a little bit like Twilight for adults, and I did not like Twilight, but I liked so many other things about it. I liked the concept of our main character being a scholar. I thought that was really cool. I loved the setting of it being in the UK because I just thought that would be really atmospheric and cool. I liked the idea of her being interested in old-timey alchemy and science, being a person who loves herbalism. I was like, I love that idea of someone finding fascination in sciences that we may have abandoned. So I was all on board. As I read this book, I started to wonder a few things. The first thought that I had was, where was the editor? Because this book has so many meandering scenes that I spent a lot of my time wondering why I was reading what I was reading. And that takes a lot for me, because I am all about having chapters that are about building an understanding of the character or relationships. Like, I feel like if we're just going from action to action, that's actually not giving me much of a read on the characters and their personalities. I'm all down for getting a feeling for who I'm reading about. But this took it to the extreme. There is literally an entire chapter about where our main character and her vampire boyfriend go to yoga together. Why? What? And I wish I was making this up. I wish I was saying like, oh, but then there's a point. There is no point. There's no point to the yoga. And I'm sure that someone is, I don't know whether this is true or not, because apparently it's a series. Someone's going to be like, but if you read book 2, I'm not reading book 2. I could barely read book 1, okay? Are you not listening to me? I'm not doing it. I've said this multiple times before. When I am reading a series, each book should be able to stand on its own. I should not have to read the books in your series to be able to understand what the hell I'm reading in book 1 or 2 or 3. And that was what was going on in this book is, I'm sitting here thinking like, maybe there's a reason that I'm sitting here reading God knows how many pages about monster yoga, but I don't know what it is. And I'm bored. There was another scene where some dangerous things happen. They wind up taking our main character, and she goes to go live in this vampire's old chateau in France, because of course he has a chateau, and he's also very handsome. These vampires never look like feet and live in a hovel. I don't know why. So she winds up going to his chateau in France, and we are treated to a long-ass chapter about them riding horses in the field together. No reason, just because horses are neat, I guess. And there are just a lot of moments like that. So I had a problem with that. The other problem I had, the other second question I started asking about our main character is, does she have a traumatic brain injury? Has anybody checked her? Because the number of times that Harkness uses this woman losing consciousness or falling asleep to switch scenes is unhealthy for anyone. Nobody should be losing consciousness as many times as this woman loses consciousness. By the end of the book, I was like, we're lucky that she knows who she is and where she is and what the current year is, because nobody should be like out that many times. It was insane. And frankly, it was without creativity. It was just kind of almost like our way of knowing that the scenes had changed, and there had to have been other ways. And I want to make it clear, I actually have my character in my book, I think he loses consciousness or faints, I want to say maybe twice. So I'm not saying that it never happens or that it should never happen, but the number of times it happens is outrageous. The characters were also very hard to like. Our vampire was the usual overly macho, overly controlling kind of male character. He actually says to her at one point that, being in a relationship with a vampire means that you're going to have to put up with the fact that I can be pretty possessive, was the term he used. No, like, ew. Why would I want that? That's so gross. I don't understand how that's attractive. I know some women like it, okay? And I do like guys being defensive of me. That's cool. That's hot. What's not hot is when you put your hands on me when I told you not to touch me. What this guy does a couple times throughout the book, where she's like, I don't want to talk to you. She tries to leave, and he literally lifts her and holds her so that she cannot leave. That's not cute. Okay, those are red flags. And then our main character is just a continuous Mary Sue. For someone who starts out proud of her brain, proud of the fact that she can manage things on her own, she spends more time being rescued and protected than any other strong female character I've ever seen. And I know that I said that I want vulnerability, but there's a difference between vulnerability and just suddenly being unable to do anything for yourself. Except every time that they find out that there is a power that is rare among witches, guess who has that power? Guess who's like, oh, can other people not do that? I've been doing that since I was a child. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I basically, by the end of the book, I was hate reading it because I had to force myself to get to the end. I was like, I don't want to DNF this because I'm so close to finishing, but that sunk cost fallacy was like hurting my heart. I could not escape, and I wanted to escape. It was too much, you guys. It was too much. So by the time it was over, I basically remember ranting about it for about 20 minutes to my husband, and then I said, I'm never reading any of these books again. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people who love it. I mean, it became a show on Netflix, but I will absolutely never be reading any of this again. So this one got a 1.75 out of me. The only reason that it didn't get a straight 1, the only reason, is that the descriptions of some of the locales were very interesting, and I do have a soft spot for the fact that Harkness actually is a scholar and a scientist, and so you could tell that she genuinely was writing about things she liked quite often in that story. So I gave her credit for that, but otherwise, no thank you. So after that nice little romp, I was feeling pretty gun shy, and I wasn't sure what to think of this next one, but I wound up really glad that I stuck with it. It is Stephen Graham Jones's The Buffalo Hunter. Jones is Indigenous, and he uses a lot of his language, a lot of Indigenous speaking patterns and Indigenous naming patterns for things. And so when I first started this book, I was a little thrown off. It was really hard to keep track of, are we talking about a man? Are we talking about an animal? What are we referring to? And as I read this story, which is about, it's a story within a story within a story, where we have a wraparound story about a woman who finds a manuscript that was left by her great-great-great-grandfather back during the Old West, and her great-great-great-grandfather is a priest, and said priest is writing his own story where he is writing he's not writing a story, he's, what's the term I'm looking for, guys? Dictating? I don't know. No, somebody else is dictating. He is being dictated to by an Indigenous man who is a vampire. And this vampire is telling him the story of how he became a vampire and how he spends most of his life kind of getting revenge on colonialists and people who kill the buffalo. At first, like I said, I was reading this and I was having a really, really hard time. I was kind of trying to understand what I was reading, and I was kind of sitting there saying, this feels dense, like this language feels really dense. I'm kind of struggling to understand. And then one day I realized that my problem was I was trying way too hard to actively engage with every word that I was reading, which is hard because I'm not Indigenous, so I don't call things wide mouths or sticky mouths or anything of that nature. So trying to figure out what those things meant was a lot. But if I took the passive route and I decided to let the words wash over me, to just let them happen, I very quickly understood and followed and began to understand the story. And once I got to that point, it was amazing. It was some of the most fun I've had reading a book because it was this perfect mixture of horror, of tragedy, of folklore, because there are a lot of folkloric moments that just feel like they're right out of a folk story. And really, you kind of realize that there are no good guys in the story by the time it's over. But it's a longer book. However, once I understood how to consume it, it was so easy and so enjoyable. And there were just so many scenes and so many moments that I was like in love and really wish that I could see this on a screen. And I think what was especially special that Jones did throughout this entire book is he does a beautiful job of kind of looking at what being a vampire would feel like for someone who is, from the moment they are born, taught to be emotionally and mentally tied to the earth and spiritually tied to the earth in a way that most of us aren't. Like, yeah, already thinking about having to suck the blood of the people that you care about is horrible. But what about when you have spiritually been taught throughout your entire life that, you respect rabbits and beavers and wolves, and that all of these creatures are very close to heavenly for you? And it's a really interesting look into what that might feel like. And Jones makes you feel what he wants you to feel throughout the entire book. If he wants you to feel dread, you feel dread. If he wants you to laugh, you laugh. There's not a lot of that, but there are a couple moments. It is a masterful write. I do have to say that I had my moments of envy because I was like, I wish I could write like this. I don't write poetically or lyrically, and it's always so cool to see people who do. So he did such a beautiful job with this book. I absolutely adored it. The only reason it wasn't a full 5 stars for me was because it did have that density, and it did take me a little bit to fully understand how to work through it. But it got I believe, what did it get? I think, guys, I actually don't have it in front of me. I am so sorry, but I think it was a 4.75. If not, it was a 4.5. I'll put it up on the screen as soon as I know. But either way, it was almost a 5, and it's definitely a book that I plan on owning as soon as I can. And then I'm wrapping up March, and I wrapped up March strong, you guys, because I read The Adventures. Why did I say it like that? Adventures? The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. And this one was another one that was recommended to me by the Books That Feel Like This subreddit. And it had been on a post about female pirates. And I had already tried one book about female pirates. That was Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. And that one got DNF'd like day and a half in, because I was like, this isn't happening. This book was such a joy to read, and it was so hard for me to stay away from. I continually kept trying to find ways to get back to keep reading it. I had so much fun with it. It is a book about a woman named Amina al-Sirafi who is middle-aged, and she has a 10-year-old daughter, and she has been retired from piracy for about 10 years now. While she is trying to just live her little life, this old lady shows up and she's like, my granddaughter's missing, and I heard that you have a way of finding people or finding things and stealing things, and I want you to find and steal my granddaughter. And with the use of bribery and threatening of Amina's family, she gets Amina to agree. And through the rest of the book, Amina winds up reconnecting with her old crew, getting a new crew, and fighting this super horrible sorcerer who has this girl under his thumb, essentially, on the boat. This was so much fun. It was like, I remember people saying that this was some of the most fun anybody had ever had reading, and I was like, reading's fun for me. I enjoy reading, and definitely I have had fun, but I was like, I'm going to have to see this for myself. I did genuinely have a blast reading this book. It was funny, it was exciting, it was creative, extremely creative, and it was, to me, the way that a series should be done. You could read The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi and move on and say, I'm happy. Like, I don't need to read anymore. And you've still got a full story. I'm not going to. I'm actually going to read the rest of the series. I'm very excited about this. I think there's a second book out, and I believe the third will be coming out soonish. But you could. And you get enough in that story that you don't really feel like there's a whole hell of a lot to follow. There are strings to follow. There are things that you would like to find out more about, but the story is enough on its own. It was really well done. It felt a lot like reading female book version of Indiana Jones. And that is a compliment. You know, it had that same like kind of swashbuckling, exciting, tongue-in-cheek, traveling across the world type vibe, and I loved it. I really can't wait to read the next 2 or 3 books whenever my TBR allows it. I highly recommend it. I'm trying to think if there is anything that I have negative to say about this book, and I genuinely don't. I do remember that when the book starts, there is quite a bit of talk of religion, which I know some people may not be a fan of, but the descriptions of religion or the discussion of religion is not in any way that's like going to be, I think, triggering to anyone who has religious trauma or anything of that nature. I think that really what it is it's kind of highlighting how these pirates who have killed people and stolen things have tried to still try to stick to some sort of ethical code, and it's actually kind of neat seeing the contrast between Amina wanting to be a good Muslim and also being like, but I'm also a pirate and I've got needs. So it was a great time. I have no complaints. Highly, highly recommend that one. And it was a 5-star book for me. It finished off my month perfectly. So yeah, go read it. And that is it. That's all I read in March. And I am going to actually be traveling, so you guys will not be getting another book wrap up from me for a couple of months. But when I do, I'm sure I will have plenty to say. Let me know what you think about these books in the comments. I always love hearing what people have to say. Give me some recommendations for my TBR. That thing is never going to get any smaller anyway. If you haven't checked out my Patreon, go check that out. That's where I write a bunch of funny short stories, and very soon I'm going to be making it available for people to read my upcoming book before anyone else. Like and subscribe like I've asked. Follow me on TikTok and Instagram if you want to see me anywhere else. And I thank you. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.